Let's bring in the Australian's contributing economics editor, Judith Sloan, live from the Sunshine Coast. Judith, great to see you as always. You've got a sensational piece in this week's Spectator Australia, in which you call for a future sorry day. Your argument is that there's going to need to be a sorry day in the years to come because of the destruction of the Australian environment by the renewables climate Labor quango. Tell us about it, Judith.
Yeah, look, I think this is a great idea. So you know how sorry days have become pretty popular. We've had sorry days for the stolen generation. We've had sorry days for people abused at daycare, sorry days for adopted children and the like. And, you know, there's a big meeting in the equivalent of the Federation Chamber if it's not a federal government sorry. And, you know, people, you know, cry and weep and great apologies are given. I really actually, even though this may seem satirical, think this is a really, really big issue because the environmental destruction that is being wrought on rural and regional communities is unbelievable, yet basically unseen by all the inner city lovies who are calling for even greater extension of renewable energy. You only have to drive around some of these rural and regional areas to realise what's happening. You know, there are vast turbines, acres of industrial-sized solar panels, and, of course, the absolutely ghastly high-voltage transmission lines. So I actually reckon we should be saying sorry today and stopping it. But I think in a decade or two there will actually be an official sorry, an official apology to rural and regional people.
Rita.
What do you see happening in 15 and 20 years other than the apology? Because we need baseload power. Labor, Greens, they're dead set against nuclear. How are we going to have the lights on when we need the lights on if we don't have nuclear? Where do you see this situation in 15, 20 years?
Well, indeed, I think we will have nuclear because what the Labor Party doesn't understand is that the pace of development of nuclear overseas is unbelievable. A whole lot of countries are really pressing the accelerator on this stuff. So there'll be some great lessons, the industry will be thickening up, there'll be some great opportunities. But here, Rita, these facilities, leave aside the transmission lines, they only last 15 or 20 years. But one of the worst aspects of it is that these renewable investors, actually they get flipped a lot, but they have never entered into an undertaking that they will remediate the land. So basically all mining companies do that, certainly do that currently. There actually are specific funds which can be used to remediate land when a mine finishes, for example. Not so with these renewable energy companies. They'll just leave and, you know, in due course, maybe the turbine will fall over, the solar panels will crack. And what people, I think, of course, in rural and regional communities understand is that, for example, the turbines are sitting on this massive quantity of concrete which is setting them in the ground, right? So what happens to that? It just sits there.
James.
Judith, I loved your article in The Spectator, but there was one part that really intrigued me. You said that rural communities, when they're given financial incentives to have these renewable plants on their property, part of that incentive requires them to speak well of the development. Talk to me about that, because I was intrigued.
Yes, that's absolutely typical. So if you agree to have a renewable installation on your property, indeed, sometimes the neighbours will get a bit of compensation, you have to sign a gag order, right? So basically you have to talk favourably about renewable energy and say that you love the turbines and the sheep love the turbines, the cattle love the turbines, right? But here's the point. Here's the point, that if you violate that gag order, they reserve the right to withdraw the monetary compensation. It is absolutely disgraceful. I mean, these renewable energy companies are acting like the wild, wild west. They've got guaranteed cash flows from the government. They have shortened environmental approval processes. They basically, given the green light over the fierce objection of locals, and yet you know, the thing is that the city people, the inner city people, the Teals, the Greens, who are baying for more renewable energy, just turn the other eye when it comes to these external costs.
And Judith, just quickly before we go, the debate in Parliament this week is about the cost of renewables versus the cost of nuclear. And there's lots of misleading obfuscation and rabbit holes that people go down. But where do you stand? You're an economist, one of Australia's most respected economists. Where do you sit on the debate about the cost, the genuine cost, both to the consumer and to the taxpayer, about renewables versus nuclear?
Well, the IPA has put out some very interesting work by Stephen Wilson, who is a nuclear expert. And of course, you're not comparing apples with apples. If you're comparing weather-dependent energy with 24/7 energy, you're not comparing the same thing. Now, their study shows, and you won't be surprised to hear this, the cheapest form of energy remains coal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, of course.
In due course, we can make nuclear work because it is 24/7. We have to have energy which is not weather dependent. We have to have baseload energy. We have to have energy that is forever on tap. And that really, hopefully, is where the debate's going. I mean, I think it's actually hilarious that they've put in Matt Keane. It is, mind you, a non-job, that job. I mean, you know, chairman of the Climate Change Authority, you know, it doesn't matter, right? But he, as you say, was never convincing when he was the energy minister in New South Wales. So is he going to be any more convincing there? It just struck me as just cheap politics. And it really, you know, had the sort of duration of a Chinese meal in terms of its political impact.